Hey, Adam, Catherine.
Ugh.
Long time
Hello.
no see.
It's Matthew Bortz
It is.
in the computer.
I've been a little out of the pastime loop for a while now, and it's because I've been working on a couple of different scientific projects that were kind of born from my dissertation research and then stuff that I've done since I graduated. Now that I'm a postdoc at Ohio University. And I'm really excited to tell you about a new animal that I helped describe.
Oh, are you?
I am. I'm always excited about new animals.
He
but
can barely
it's
contain
kind of-
it.
I'm guessing it's a fuzzy thing, and as you and I study, feathery things and scaly things, you'll have to justify just why this new animal is worthy of our attention.
All right, I'll give you one quick blurb on that. So it's named Masreceptor nananubis. Masreceptor nananubis. That is the Egyptian slicer, tiny god of the underworld.
Okay, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I'm sold.
Yeah.
I'm sold. Okay.
With that, my name is Matt Bortz.
I'm Adam Pritchard.
And I'm Catherine Early, and this is Pastime.
So Masreceptor nananubis, slicer named for an Egyptian god. Does this fossil come from Egypt?
That's exactly where it comes from. It actually comes from a site that I did a lot of work on called the Fayum Depression in Egypt. And it's basically like you kind of hang a right from the pyramids going out of Cairo and you go out into the desert and the Fayum is out there. And the Fayum is important for archaeologists because there are burial sites actually out there, and there are people looking for mummies and tombs. And it was kind of a beach town in ancient Egyptian and ancient Greek times. But under the feet of ancient Egyptians and ancient Greeks were a whole bunch of really important fossils from the early evolution of African mammals. And so there's been a team out there for over 60 years working for different groups, but people have been looking at the rocks for a very long time. And the initial reason people started looking was there are a lot of really important ancient relatives of ours that come from this site. They're very early primates that are found in the Fayum.
More fuzzy things.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the fuzzy things, but there are fuzzy things. And stalking these, our earliest ancestors, were a group of animals that I study called hyenodonts. And hyenodonts are these sharp-toothed animals that would have looked a little bit like kind of weird dogs. I kind of describe them as like the wargs from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, they have. I've seen some pictures of them that you've shown me. Like they have really large heads relative to their body size.
Yeah, so they all have these big Pac-Man heads stuck on kind of bodies that looked a little bit like a dog or a cat. And part of the reason for that is the big difference between a hyenodont and the modern carnivores we have today. Things like dogs and cats and bears and hyenas, they're all really closely related to each other, actually. And one of the things that unites dogs and cats and bears and hyenas is they all have this one meat-slicing tooth in their face, and that's how they like to go after vertebrate prey and slice through it. We think of the canines as being the way you recognize a meat eater, but what's really important is having these scissors in the back of your face that help you actually cut up the meat so you can eat it really quickly. In hyenodonts, they didn't have one set of meat-slicing teeth. They had three.
Whoa.
So these were super predators that we're dealing with. And so we had very scared little primates living in Egypt about 34 to 35 million years ago. And one of the animals that was chasing after our early primate relatives was this animal called Masreceptor, which means the Egyptian hunter. And because it's from this ancient Egyptian site and it's dead, and it looks a little bit like a jackal, which is what the head of Anubis looked like, this ancient Egyptian god of the underworld, we decided to name it Masreceptor nananubis, the tiny Anubis.
So hyenodonts are part of a larger group referred to as creodonts. And you've shown me pictures of just the vast range and size of creodonts, ranging from animals the size of little weasels up to rhino-sized carnivores that are bigger than anything that is mammalian and eats meat on land that we have today. So Masreceptor nananubis is sort of on the low end of that size scale.
Yeah, this thing only would have been, it's like the size of a skunk. Like it's a pretty little guy. And it's part of what makes it so important is the big hyenodonts are the most easy to collect, they're the most obvious ones because they have big heads and big teeth. And the little ones are only kind of recently coming out of the ground. And only a couple years ago, the earliest known hyenodont was discovered at a North African site. And before that, hyenodonts are this group that they're found in Africa. They're also found in Asia and in North America and in Europe, kind of at the beginning of the age of mammals. So dinosaurs go extinct. For the next 45 million years, there are hyenodonts walking across the landscape eating meat. And in Europe and in North America and in Asia, they're sharing that meat-eating niche with the early relatives of cats and dogs. But in Africa, hyenodonts are the only meat eaters in town. And so they are kind of the top predators in a lot of these environments, and they have an incredible diversity that goes with that. And Mazarosector is part of that, being this small-bodied, weasel-like animal that would have been kind of scrambling through the trees or the undergrowth, going after all kinds of small prey that the really big guys probably were ignoring.
So when you talk about them chasing through trees, are you saying that they might have been climbing these trees?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why Mazarosector is a really important new animal to have, because a lot of the African fossil record for hyenodonts is all teeth, basically. It's because that's the hardest part of the body of a mammal. It's the thing that preserves, and we have lots of great fossils of teeth. And we can learn a lot about an animal from its teeth, what it ate, how big it was, what it's related to. But it's hard to say how it moved. And one of the things we have from Mazarosector is actually the limb bones that go with this animal. Oh. And so by studying its elbows, by studying its ankles, we can figure out things like this particular species was probably something that it preferred to move on the ground. It would have been something like a fox, I think. It would have been kind of running along on the ground, chasing after things like small hyraxes, which are kind of rabbit-like animals that still live in Africa today. But also during ancient times, about 35 million years ago, there were small hyraxes, but also horse-sized hyraxes and rhino-sized hyraxes. Africa is just this amazing continent because it was cut off from the rest of the world for a really long time. It was like Australia is today, kind of a continent island. And on that island, animals like hyenodonts and hyraxes and elephants were all kind of experimenting with what different parts of the ecosystem they could move into. And hyenodonts kind of sit at the top of the food chain of this early African ecosystem. And it seems like the fossil record of hyenodonts actually begins in Africa. They might be this African group that then got out and populated Europe and Asia and North America, possibly. Although there's also some evidence that they might actually be from Europe and then get down into Africa where they radiate and become really successful there. And trying to figure out those kinds of stories, which way these animals are going between continents and how they're spreading out and diversifying, require fossils from all of those continents we can compare to each other. And because the African fossil record was so scrappy for such a long time, it was hard to figure out how the African animals kind of plug into the larger story of hyenodont evolution around the world. And what's really cool about what we have at this site in the Fayum, it's called Locality 41, where we find actually, instead of just bits and pieces of teeth and jaws, we actually find complete skulls and sometimes even complete skeletons. And this particular species, normally when a fossil species is named, you have a few bits and pieces that you tell people, I think this is a new animal, I'm going to give it a name. And then other people go out and they find more material and oh, this looks like that other thing you already found. In this case, because people have been collecting for such a long time, we're announcing a new species based on a group of skulls that have been found. And it's probably one of the best sampled and most complete hyenodonts, definitely from Africa, and possibly globally from this time period at least. So it becomes really important for figuring out the evolution of hyenodonts, because you can look at its head, you can look at its arms, you can look at its ankles, look at its ears and its teeth, and kind of put all of that together to figure out how hyenodonts evolved in Africa, and then how the African animals are connected to the whole global story of these really terrifying meat-eating predators.
And also just the ecology of the group, because you're able to use all that information from different parts of the skeleton to inform what these animals are doing in their own environment.
Exactly. One of the things that we did is we used a bunch of measurements that we took from these bones, especially the limb bones, to try to figure out what other animals moved the way that Mazarosector did. So we compared it to a lot of modern meat-eating things that we can observe how they move and how they run, and put Mazarosector into that and compare it to foxes and compare it to raccoons. We compared the bones both by looking at them and studying the anatomy, but also by studying a bunch of measurements. We could take the measurements, compare them to other measurements we took from other animals that are alive today that we can observe how they move, how they run. And we found out that Mazarosector moved a lot like an animal, a carnivore, that lives mostly on the ground. And so that was a really important discovery because we also have evidence of some hyenodonts that lived in trees and some that probably could kind of go back and forth between those two spaces. And so we kind of flesh out this ecosystem with all of its carnivores in place. And so this is kind of a really exciting first pass at figuring out what hyenodont bodies were capable of and how they interacted with their environment.
Well, Matt, that sounds like a really exciting project. We're really happy you've got it out.
Yeah, I'm convinced.
Yeah.
It's another interesting fuzzy thing.
So if people want to read the paper, where can they find it?
So it's available in the online journal PLOS ONE. That's PLOSONE. And the title of this thing is Craniodental and Humeral Morphology of a New Species of Mazarosector from the Late Eocene of Egypt and Locomotor Diversity in Hyenodonts. Or you can just Google my name and hyenodonts, and it'll probably pop up.
Very cool.
Well, to see some images and some information about this animal, please check out our website, pastime.org. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Pastime Paleo. And subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and leave us a review there if you could.
And with that, my name is Matt Bortz.
I'm Adam Pritchard.
And I'm Catherine Early, and we'll see you next time on Pastime.